Hello, Foothill kids. Today we're going to continue talking about David, and I'm going to read from our lesson book about David's heart for God. God told the prophet Samuel to travel to a little town called Bethlehem. Why is Bethlehem famous? Do you know? Do you remember? Do you remember a special little baby being born in Bethlehem? Bethlehem is also famous because the main person we're talking about today is Jesus' greatest ancestor. So listen carefully and see if you can figure out who it is. In Bethlehem, Samuel was to visit a man named Jesse. God would show Samuel which one of Jesse's sons would be the next king of Israel. God told Samuel to take a horn filled with special oil. When God showed Samuel the next king, Samuel would pour the special oil from the horn onto his head. To be anointed this way was truly a great honor. When Samuel and Jesse met, Samuel asked to meet all of Jesse's sons. Samuel wondered which one of these sons God would choose for the next king of Israel. So all of Jesse's sons stood before Samuel. The oldest one looked tall and handsome. Samuel wondered if God would choose the oldest son to be king, but God said no. You see, Samuel looked on the outside, but God cares about what's in our hearts. God said no to the other sons too. Samuel asked Jesse, "Do you have any other sons?" Jesse was surprised at Samuel's question. Didn't he already have his strongest, handsomest sons standing before the prophet? But he answered truthfully, "My youngest son is out watching the sheep." Watching the sheep was the least important job of all. There wasn't much glory in being a shepherd, so it was no surprise that Jesse had given this job to his youngest son. But Samuel said, "We will not sit down to dinner until he arrives." I bet the older brothers grumbled to each other about that. When the young shepherd David arrived, God told Samuel, "This is the one. This is the next king of Israel." Samuel could see that David looked tan and strong from his days spent outdoors looking after his father's sheep. Samuel took the special horn filled with oil and spilled the oil all over David's head, announcing to Jesse and his family that David was God's choice for the next king of Israel. Jesse's older sons probably grumbled again. After all, older brothers tend to think that they're a lot stronger and wiser than their younger brothers, don't they? They may have grumbled all right, but Samuel was God's high priest. Everyone knew that God spoke through Samuel, so if Samuel said David was to be the next king, then David was to be the next king, and that was that. After Samuel left, David went straight back to caring for his father's sheep, just as he had done before. You see, Saul was still ruling king. David was to be the next king when the time came for a new king. In the meantime, it didn't bother David to obey his father and live as humbly as he had before. That is until one day when David came to the Israelites' camp, bringing food to his older brothers. He heard the Philistines' giant calling out insults to the God of Israel. David couldn't believe it. Who would dare to insult God? Although David was just a teenager, he went to the King Saul and volunteered to fight the giant. King Saul wondered how a young boy could defeat a giant. David explained that while he watched over his sheep in the wilderness, he had fought off both lions and bears. He believed that God, who helped him defeat lions and bears, could also help him defeat Goliath. Saul put his own armor on David, but it was way too big. David felt clumsy in the heavy armor. He was a shepherd, not a soldier. He was used to running free, not wearing heavy armor. So David took off Saul's armor and went to fight the Philistines his own way, wearing just his tunic and armed with a simple shepherd's sling, like a slingshot. A sling was one long piece of rope or leather with a loop at both ends and a wide section in the middle to hold a stone, sort of like the slingshot I have here. A good slinger could whirl it and then let it go at one end, sending the stone sailing at high speed towards its target. Good slingers had worked as soldiers for many centuries. A stone or other small object slung at high speed could fly a long distance with deadly accuracy. But the giant Goliath had no respect for David's skill with a sling. Goliath laughed when he saw the small shepherd who had come to fight him. He asked, "You come at me with sticks and stones?" David answered confidently, "I come in the name of the living God." David had no fear of Goliath's size at all. He knew that God was so much bigger than any man, no matter how big, so he put a smooth stone in his sling, whirled it around and around, and then with a great skill let it go just at the right time. Smack! The stone hit the giant right in the forehead, and down he fell. The Israelites all praised David and made him a great hero, but David knew that the victory was God's. David had kept his heart open to God, and something amazing happened. David could not stand to hear God's name mocked or made fun of. This passion for God guided David throughout his life. It wasn't a life without fault, but David was a person God chose to bless. Someone who knew how to pray to God, and in Psalms, a book in the Bible, 1,000 years later still expresses the feelings in our hearts. David was a person whose deep humility before God led to the only divinely appointed or decided dynasty, which itself led to the birth of the Messiah. When asked a trick question by the Pharisees, Jesus quickly solved this mystery of why some were blessed while others were cast away. Jesus said, "And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and all your strength." God loves those who love him with all their hearts, soul, mind, and strength. When our human nature collides with Jesus' divine love, Jesus transforms us into people who carry that passionate love of God. We live and work not for our own glory or to be popular, but for the glory that will come to the God we love. Have a nice day.